Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. My name is Anaclaudia Rossbach. I am the Regional Manager of the Cities Alliance in Latin America. I welcome you to this Urban Thinker Campus, Islam Upgrading in Asia. This is the third session on Islam Upgrading. We would like to thank your presence here in the name of all co-organizers, the University of St. Gallen, and a wide range of organizations that are co-organizing, sponsoring this session. You will find all the links, all the logos on your screen. I would like only to share some practical announcements before we start. This is a webinar session on Zoom. We are recording this session. This is also now live on Facebook. At the end, I will ask you to keep your mics off. Keep the video for the presenters in the first part of the session. In the second part, we'll have a roundtable and we'll enable our videos and mics. We'll also have interpretation to Spanish, so you only have to go to the bottom of your screen and click on the interpretation channel in case you need interpretation to Spanish. You just choose your language there. So with no further ado, I will hand over to the moderator of this first part of the Urban Thinker Campus, Celine D'Cruz. I don't know exactly how to introduce Celine because Celine is Celine. She is a practitioner and she comes from India, but she knows the world very well. She's very acquainted with the Islam's context, and I think she will be able to introduce herself, but I believe most of us already know Celine. Okay, Celine, handing over to you.
Thank you, Anna, and I look forward to this energizing session, and I hope people don't go to sleep after 2 hours. So the first roundtable will have 4 speakers. We have with us today Dr. Ajay Suri, who used to be the manager for Cities Alliance, who will give us an overview of Asia. That's a long expectation to have out of him, but we will make the most out of Dr. Ajay's experience and knowledge of the Asian region. He has a lot of experience in South Asia, Southeast Asia, and also in Africa and Latin America. So it'll be good to get a perspective from him. After that, it will be followed by Habitat for Humanity, James Samuel. James heads the organization HFH in Bangladesh, but he has also tremendous experience in different countries, in different continents, in different regions, but he's very locally based in Bangladesh, and we look forward to getting a very deep and a very meaningful story out of Habitat's work in Bangladesh, so we understand the urban context better. Then, of course, we have the minister from Indonesia, who is the Minister for the National Development Planning of the Republic of Indonesia. It's huge, and it's great that we have a woman there who will be able to give us her perspective of the challenges that a Minister for Urban Development faces in a huge country like Indonesia, and what does she see the next 10 years, and where is Indonesia heading? So we'd like to stay specifically with Indonesia there, and then we move on to Thailand. And we have with us Minh Chau, who used to be in the Ministry for Land and Housing in the government of Vietnam. And now Minh Chau works with the Asian Coalition for Housing Rights, supporting groups all over Asia. And she will give us a perspective, a more general perspective of ACHR's strategy in the region on slum upgrading, and will maybe also help us understand a little more about what's happening in Thailand with the CODI finance facility. So over the years, communities have made a big shift. There was a time in the 80s when all we did was manage evictions every week. And communities today have reached another level, governments have reached another level where evictions have stopped. Not completely, but to a large extent, governments are realizing that that's not a solution to long-term, to solving long-term problems. And if you really want to build capacity and make your city grow, it's important that we invest equally in poor communities and not treat them like they are outsiders. So Cities Alliance has a word for that and says, cities without slums. It's a controversial sentence but the positive side of cities without slums is how do we make our slums, and how do we celebrate our slums, and how do we actually include them and make them part of the city fabric. Uh, Communities have therefore over the last 10-15 years tested out upgrading projects. They have worked with local governments, national governments, but we have a long way to go. While communities have done a lot, that is not sufficient. We know that we need institutional relationships, and the minister can tell us more about that, of why we need to institutionalize these relationships between poor communities and government, and why is it to the advantage of governments to do that in the long run. And we look forward to a very energizing conversation with all of you and get a perspective. We don't need just the beautiful stories, but it will also be good if you're able to understand the challenges of each of your perspectives of where you come from as government, as practitioners, as researchers, as local government, as local NGOs. Great. On that note, I will welcome Ajay to kick off this session.
Thanks very much. Hi, everyone. Uh, Depending on the zone where you are located, good morning, good evening, good afternoon. Thanks to the organizers for the invite. Thanks to Celine for the kind introduction. I think very aptly said, it's impossible to give an overview of Asia, more so in flat 10 minutes. Uh, as all of us know, Asia is the largest region in the world. It's very diverse. Each sub-region has its own characteristics and peculiarities, but it's always good to keep a few numbers in mind when one is looking at the development perspective. One half of the world population lives in Asia, although the urbanization level in Asia does not match the level in Latin America. It is high, but not as high as Latin America. But it's just the annual urbanization rate and the sheer size of annual urban incremental population, which are the defining features of Asia. Once we recognize this high numbers that are getting into cities every year, it's very easy to imagine the challenges that the local governments face. And most local governments, irrespective of the countries and sub-regions in Asia, have not been up to the mark to match the demand with the supply of habitat, that's housing and urban services. Again, a few numbers. Uh, just a moment. Yes, urban population in Asia have low access to safe water and modified sanitation facilities. Just one third and two-third of the population have access to these services. One of the world's urban slum population resides in Asia, which gives you an idea how far behind the local governments are to meet the demand of the urban dwellers in the cities. uh, all of us do realize the 5 criteria that UNCHS, now UN Habitat, had adopted for defining slums. I won't go into the 5 criteria, but if I was to pick the most defining feature of the slums in Asia, it's the low access to urban services. That's uniform, that's across all cities, countries, sub-regions in Asia, if one is looking at the slums. Uh, there are two other criteria which have an impact on the quality of life in slums. That's the tenure status or occupancy rights and population density. These cannot be generalized across countries and subregions. These vary across sub-regions and also across the size of the cities. If one was to look at the density, that's per capita living space and or number of families per hectare, this is high in South Asian countries. Look at India and Bangladesh. While Southeast Asia, East Asia, and Pacific Islands, the densities are manageable. Also, if you look at the primary cities, uh, in across the sub-regions, the primary cities have high densities compared to secondary cities. Look at Iran. Tehran, the densities are high compared to Bandrabad, Zahedan, or Kermanshah. Look at Vietnam. Hanoi has higher densities compared to secondary cities like Tamki and Quinon. Look at Indonesia, Jakarta vis-a-vis Bandung and Surabaya, and also look at Bangladesh, Dhaka versus Sylhet or Narayanganj or other secondary cities. Uh, Also, if you look at ownership rights or the occupancy rights, a high percentage of slum dwellers in secondary cities generally have higher land rights or occupancy rights compared to the primary cities. This is particularly true in a country like India, where in the primary cities, the slum dwellers do not have occupancy rights. Whereas if you look at the secondary cities, the slum dwellers do have ownership rights, and the challenge is low access to services. Well, these are the kind of challenges facing the local governments. But if one was to look at slum upgrading at large, I believe there are three major challenges facing slum upgrading at scale. I'm not talking about pilots. I'm looking at slum upgrading at scale. The first factor is, and this is despite the fact that most countries or many countries have national slum upgrading strategies, most national governments have not fully accepted slum upgrading as a viable solution to improving quality of life of the informal settler families. They still look at, they still consider informal as illegal. They still overlook slum upgrading vis-a-vis resettlement or rehabilitation. So this is the first challenge, acceptability of in situ slum upgrading as a viable solution to the slum challenges. And related to this is the fact that the informal settler families are still not recognized as legitimate citizens with right to the city. And the third challenge to my mind are the low capacities of the local governments. Uh, the low capacities of the local government to retrofit infrastructure services or network services in dense settlements, and low capacities of the local governments to form partnership with the communities to plan and implement slum upgrading programs. These are the three generic challenges across cities and countries. But I would also like to flag 6 challenges which most cities face if they were to implement slum upgrading at a scale. The first one would be community database, both in terms of enumeration and mapping of slums. The second challenge is service level benchmarking to assess the development needs of the slum communities. The third challenge, as I said, is the city level partnership. That's the partnerships between informal settler families or slum communities and other city stakeholders. The fourth challenge is to resolve the issue of occupancy rights. Surprisingly, most local governments still look at occupancy rights as de jure ownership rights, which is not necessarily so. We have had very successful programs which asked the land owning agencies to say that the slum dwellers would not be evicted for 7 to 10 years, which is give them occupancy rights just for 7 to 10 years. And then the service agencies were willing to give various services like street paving, electrification, network services. So we need to get out of this mindset whereby we equate occupancy rights with de jure ownership rights. The fifth challenge is improving access to services. And lastly, providing the slum dwellers with access to institutional home loan facilities, which would ensure incremental house upgrading. I believe I have just mentioned the challenges. There are successes as well. Thailand stands out in terms of community engagement in slum upgrading. I'm not saying all issues are resolved. Drive-through Bangkok shows we still have informal settlements on the banks of canals and on the sides of highways and expressways. Indonesia has been success. It was the front runner when it launched and implemented the Kampung Improvement Program. Also, countries like India, which is diverse, huge, is more like a continent. We have successes in Mumbai, which adopted an innovative in situ slum rehabilitation by using land as a resource. Let me stop here. I hope I have been able to give some kind of an overview of the challenges in slum upgrading in Asian region. Thanks very much.
Great. Can we now invite James Samuel to give us this Bangladesh story?
All right. I would like to refrain from using video to have an uninterrupted internet. So I'm kind of in a rural setup, so working on a very limited bandwidth. Can somebody put on my slides, please?
You can read more about all the speakers in the chat box.
Yes. Let's get to the third slide. Yeah. The for Humanity, Bangladesh has been working in Dhaka slums to increase this next one, please. To increase the resilience of slum communities in Dhaka through the completion of various activities and using community action planning, urban mapping, water and sanitation, infrastructure, housing repairs, and capacity building. So basically, we initiated some of these activities way back in 2014. And next slide, please. And before going further to, let me give a kind of a brief profile. Yeah, thank you. Profile of Dhaka with its population of approximately 21 million. And out of this, approximately 4 million lives in slums. And every year, 300,000 to 400,000 people, rural migrant arrive in Dhaka in search of work. So it's continuously increasing. You know, you see, one of the key problems in the slums are illegal occupancy, tenure, security, and apart from water, sanitation, poor housing, and lack of and problems. Next slide, please. I'm conscious about the time, so I will just have to kind of go a little more faster, and you will have an opportunity to ask questions. So there are 6 major cities in Bangladesh, and you can see that 34% of the total population of approximately 166 million live in slums. So you see that in a percentage, 30. The total population of 66 million lives in the slum, and as Mr. Suri has just said, you know, about the household kind of how much time they use for dwelling. 81 there's only one kind of that's a dwelling area of almost 119 square feet of the they live. And if you see that, you know, this kind of a background that it's inhuman living condition, and that's where Habitat for Humanity resumed its projects, you know, just to kind of do a micro project to kind of bring in a macro impact in Dhaka, and that's what you will see in my some of my slides. The next one, please. So you can see the key objective or which we are implementing, which you already saw that, the fostering sound relationship between service provider and slum communities. This is something which we want to enable programming. It is so very important that you develop that relationship between the service providers and the slum and the communities. And I will talk about it more as we move forward. And our project in Dhaka slum was to improving access to water sanitation, and that means sustainable water sanitation programming, including operation maintenance costs and like that, and drainage facilities, and along with water and sanitation programming, and also increase capacity in disaster preparedness. It's most of this time those slums where we're working is disaster prone areas. So we also had to really make sure that we address disaster related issues as well. The next slide, please. About the activities, the key activities, strategic activities which we try to address. The next. So to have a sustainable program, we need to either strengthen, we need to really strengthen local and the capacity. So if such institutions are not available, we need to really create one. So what we did was we really started with this wash committees to start with, and build that capacity. And we talk about this. You will see how they work and they function. So we develop these local committees and build capacity then. So along with both hardware and software activities, right from constructing facilities and drainage to establishing waste management system. We also did a lot of software activities that part of our strategy to really work on these communities. So the next one, please. And I would like to kind of show some pictorial presentation of our strategic activities, like what we did. And that would be some other thing. Instead of me talking, you will really see what is happening in that I think it takes time to, yeah. And you see that how we kind of intervene in working in those slums and creating kind of a structure on a pilot basis is a micro project, but it really helped us to kind of create a macro. And I will talk about this further. So it's inclusive toilet construction, and it's both for men and women, and also for the disabled communities, disabled people in the communities. So this is about the toilet construction. The next one, please. This is the footpath, the walkway, which we really built there, and the condition earlier was kind of very bad, and this is about with community participation. The next one. Yes, this is about the drainage and school field. Near that slum is the school, and trying to build up that. So we built the drainage in the community, and also trying to help in the school field raising. Next one. Yeah. if this our intervention, you can see that what was before and what was after. Where we were trying to provide a water supply, kind of build a reservoir and repairing lines. And so here you see the water pump, hand pump, and there's an waste management where how there was a dumping ground there, to kind of change that and make an arrangement for using the waste and taking it away from the slum. Again, you see the before and after. There's another station facility and an example of the footpath which we try to build there. Next one, please.
We lost him.
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Now we can.
Yes.
Yeah, please. Then can you hear me?
Yes. Please go ahead.
Can you please show me the slide? Yeah.
Can you see it, James?
Yes, I can see. Yeah, this is another example of one of our activity of disaster reduction response. Basically, kind of developing the capacity of some of the community leaders in disaster and response. Because this is, as I said, we had a lot of slum areas where this regular flooding happens, and also a lot of cases of fire. So basically, there is a volunteer training in order to address and try to address some of this disastrous situation in the slum. Next one, please. Yeah, this is another example of solid waste management, and so we provided some of this waste bin to the slum dwellers so that they collect the garbage in one place, and then send it through the trucks to the dumping areas. The next one, please. That's another example of how hygiene and environmental sustainability that is which we continuously try to focus on. And these are the volunteers in the communities who were voluntarily try to engage in some of the activities which we were initiating in the community. And a good example is that the slum is becoming more cleaner and more. Next one, please. This is another about the wash fair. Next one. And water and sanitation, and what we are trying to do through our water and sanitation program. Yeah, advocacy is something which is very, very important part of this, and that able to, as I micro project with the macro impact, and we are working with the local government, with the local with the central government in order to influence them and bringing them into this urban dialogue and creating a partnership for this advocacy. And we have an NGO forum, INGO forum, actually, with 40 members into it, and they are kind of working as a pressure group to influence of our some of the themes and agenda to the government to impact some of the urban issues and take up those challenges in their strategies. Next one, please. And some of our parts are here, with partner. They are the local government, the service providers, and CBOs, community-based organizations, and also international and national organization. As I said, we form an NGO forum, and they are part of that forum to kind of work as a pressure group to take up the challenges. Yeah, I will leave this one because of the time. Is basically talking about the challenge, and basically what we're trying to do is urban communities very dynamic and dense. So how do we address this issue of? So we are trying to work along with the committee to address some of the things. Yeah, please let me go to the next one. This is important. Next one. The major challenges. Actually, I will not focus on all the challenges here, but as you can see that how important is to adequately framework and enabling environment. If we don't have a proper and legislation in place, it becomes very difficult, and that's something which is a major challenge here to implement any project successfully. A proper policy framework and an enabling environment is necessary, and Bangladesh is moving towards creating such policy environment and also to create a sustainable impact through that policy making. So urban policy of 2014 is existing, is operational, and I think we are trying to kind of work along with the government there. And there are also coming up with 2 new proper strategy for water and sanitation sector and institutional reform, and which is not yet been introduced but is being under signature. So I think it should be done anytime. So basically, in short, what we can say is, however, this proper implementation, these which are already existing, requires is not fully being implemented because lack of continuity of government policies or inadequate human and material resources, all of which will lead to implementation gap. And we probably all understand that, and lack of consultation and participation all other key stakeholders. And along with that, I would also say that there is a kind of a need to improve the political will and commitment in order to address urban issues, and also there need to be also participation, and which government need to recognize the vital role of civil society participation in urban governance. And that's something which is important. Last, inadequate capital spending on urban structure. I think in 2017, Bangladesh spent around 6 billion for urban infrastructure. If you really compare this, was 3 billion, I think. And if you really compare with Indonesia for the 2020 to 2024, it is 400 billion. So I think there's a lot of difference. So I think government is taking more keen interest right now in addressing some of. I think it is a kind of a good environment which has been created in Bangladesh to work on some of these critical issues, and I think the political will and commitment is gradually increasing. And with this, I think we don't have time, so I would probably finish here, and thank you very much. Do we have time to take another?
Thank you, James. I think we'll come back at the end with the questions to everyone, unless you want to add something.
That's what yes. Yeah, I think that would be good. I think address the concerns, the questions which people have.
Great, thank you. We'll now move to the Minister Ibu Virgi from the Ministry of National Development Planning of the Republic of Indonesia. Welcome, Minister, and we look forward to your story from Indonesia.
Thank you, Celine. I'm not the minister though. I'm just the director for housing and human settlements in the Ministry of National Development Planning of Indonesia. So thank you very much for the opportunity and for the invitation to talk in this very important and very interesting forum in Asia. So maybe from here, also we can really learn from, like, for example, from Bangladesh that just presented, but I will also like to share what we have experienced in Indonesia. So next, so maybe it's similar like Bangladesh. We are an urban country now. We are not, so most of our people, next, can please, sorry, can everybody hear me? I mean, if you cannot hear me, maybe just please tell me. So
you're very clear, go ahead.
I'll stop the video, so just make sure that my voice is clearly heard. So as like any country, I think globally we are facing urbanization. Most of our people now living in an urban area, which is maybe people also very well know how then it will impact our overcrowding cities, overcrowding people in a smaller space than in a rural area. So at the moment we have 273 million people, but it will increase until 350 million people in 2045. And at that time, we projected that 70% of our, almost 70% of our people will live in urban areas. So it's a big number. More than 200 million people will live in urban area by the time of 245. But at the moment, nationally, we have, what do you call it? Almost 40% of people living in inadequate houses, and only 56% live in adequate houses. Some of adequate houses even still have need to be improved as well. So it's a lot. It's almost 15 million, more than 15 million households. Although it's spreading in all over the country. We are also a big country from north to south, from east to west. So it's a big country. We consist of more than 10,000 islands. We have 6 or 7 big islands. The most overcrowded one is Java. So people live in Java is almost now 60% of 270 million. So it's more than 140 million people live in Java itself. So it's a big, especially problem in the urban area, Java, West Java, western part of Indonesia. So we have 3.9 million urban households live in overcrowded housings, and 1 in 5 urban residents in Indonesia live in slum area. So we of course, we need a comprehensive program for this. Next, why? Of course, we already know why we need to improve this kind of human settlement that is not adequate. Spread of the diseases like TB, diarrhea, and even now COVID-19 and other problems of health, as well as productivity and financial losses due to the disaster, or due to the low quality of life in this kind of settlement. So in terms of this, we trying every 5 years we have a medium-term development plan, and we're trying to improve it every period and every year. Next, please. So at the moment we have the medium-term development plan for 2020 to 2024. Next, please. Sorry. Should I?
I'm so sorry. I just stuck.
Okay.
I will quickly reshare. Hopefully it will work.
I project it myself?
No worries. It should be back now, right? Correct?
Sorry. Okay, next please. Next slide. So in this medium-term development plan, we're trying to improve from the previous period. We're trying to have more comprehensive approach to housing and settlements issues. So from housing financing, from housing provision of public housing, housing improvement from what existing housing already there, because most, maybe 80%, 70 to 80% of our houses in households provide the house by themselves. It's not they don't access it through the market or formal market. So it's they self-supply of this housing. So the problem then they may construct a housing that doesn't really fulfill the standard of safety and health housing, adequate housing. So, and then the other problem is also integrated slum handling. From learning from experience from these years, we see that achieving cities without slum, we need to make a comprehensive approach to may I project it by myself? Maybe I can do it. Sorry.
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay, just a second. Can everybody see?
Yeah, that's perfect.
Okay.
Thank you.
So we see that there are a lot of aspects in achieving cities without slum. First is basic infrastructure, like the experience in Bangladesh before. Wash sector is very crucial to be provided in this kind of settlements, even other type of settlements, not just slums. So even it will be more important in this kind of slum area. And then, and our existing programs still focus on this kind of aspect, but to prevent a new slum area from created from developed, we also need to have a housing provision, especially for low-income household, especially in the urban area. So, and then, but to provide housing, we need to make sure that the land is available. It's also difficult, especially in the urban area. And with our system of land, when land is basically owned by private mostly, and then some developers own a big part of big area of land. Sometimes difficult for the low income people to access land tenure. So, and then housing finance, how can they access it financially affordable for this low income housing. So, and then spatial planning, law enforcement, make sure that the city doesn't develop in sprawling outside the boundaries, outside what we want to spatially plan. And then social economy, because of this slum, usually they live in an area that close to where their livelihood is available for them. I mean, for their activities, their work and their jobs and so on. So we need to make sure that they also can improve their level of life, their level of livelihood, so they can improve as well their quality of life, their quality of housing, their quality of hygiene and so on. So it's a comprehensive thing that we need to approach for this for slum cities without slum. At this moment, from maybe 5 years ago, 2016, it was prepared even longer than that. We have a the current biggest slum upgrading program in Indonesia. We call it Kotaku, Kota Tanpa Kumuh in Bahasa, which means city without slum until now. But as I mentioned, the existing program still focus more on the upgrading project, like the examples of the pictures here. But there are many, we still have a big area of slum that need a different approach, a more comprehensive approach than this, because sometimes the land is not owned or the land is not clear, the security, I mean the title, and then sometimes illegal, sometimes they occupy private land or government land and so on. So we need to make sure that we have a comprehensive approach. And then sometimes the houses is scattered. It's not irregular structure of the houses. So we need also to make sure that visually, and also the public spaces, the spaces for infrastructure is also available in this kind of areas or settlements. So this program, the biggest one here, we have implemented since 2016 in 269 districts or cities with more than 11,000 urban villages. We targeted almost 25,000 hectares, but the progress now is still half of it. We still have things to do to make sure, especially the one that we want to have a comprehensive approach. And at the moment, we still have, we are successful in terms of small scale, not partial, upgrading some basic infrastructure. So the key challenges again is still limited to basic infrastructure. Collaboration with other sectors needed, like land, financial, economic, and so on. And upgrading is not really suitable for heavy slum area or squatter. And then still focus on condition, on the existing, improving the existing condition without any real effort to prevent new slum area to be developed. So we still have homework to do. And in the future, I mean, starting this period of medium-term development, we want to have a more comprehensive approach, learning from what we have before. So it's not just slum upgrading, but also slum prevention. Especially this will, we want to prevent new slum area settlements to be developed. Therefore, we have to make sure that land is provided, planning is taken integratedly, investment, housing finance is there, regulation, and housing industry that is accessible by the low-cost people, community. So finding the method that combine this approach is also a challenge, because we have so many things, yeah, to make sure about, in this comprehensive approach. So with this, we have two tracks. We will try to implement this in two tracks of urban. We call it urban renewal or urban revitalization. First track is community-based urban renewal. This will be like a small-scale urban renewal, and then large-scale urban renewal. That's the second track. The benefit of this is also it will provide effective urban space for utilization, adding supply of new affordable houses, so we can prevent new settlement of slum to be developed, because people can access this kind of affordable houses in the city. Placing community as a shareholder, because community, especially for the land that is owned or has been occupied long by the community, then we will have a negotiation with the community how they can also be a shareholder in this kind of development. So we also trying to prevent gentrification to happen. And supporting inclusivity, because then it will be a mix also between low income and middle income community to live together, and value added to the urban economy, because then the area will be better and emergence for the new economic activity in the city. So actually this has been This approach has been done by several local governments. For example, the one in Central Java, they have 584 households. They've been living in a riverbank, so they're trying to consolidate it was unstructured, irregular housing buildings and so on. So they're trying to consolidate the land and then divide the land for every household. And then new houses was built by collaboration between local fundings, national fundings, especially special allocated fund that has been transferred from central government to the local government. This approach will be, some are already there, but in 2021, the next year, it will be quite several local government who will implement this. We have 7 at least, and this approach is we confident that it will be quite successful. Why? Because the plan comes from the bottom, I mean from the local governments. So the central government will only facilitate and give fund collaboration, especially from the special allocation fund. And it was a competition, a competitive, the fund is competitive. So the local government who has a better or best proposal will get the access to the fund. This one is also another example. Another one in Pahuato is in the island of Maluku, and then maybe next. However, this community-based urban renewal or track 1 also still has challenges. The first one is how can we scale up this program to other local government that may not realize that this is important. That's also a challenge. So we're trying to have a good and sound policy, so many local government can join this kind of program. And then building consensus with the community is not a short period of process. It's quite long. And then preventing gratification, ensuring community participation, multi-party collaboration, because without any collaboration, the local government will not be able to provide the fund that is needed. So they need to collaborate especially with the provincial government, with the central government, as well as with the community itself. So a big amount is financing is required. So for the large scale, this one is even bigger challenge, and we're still trying to find the low-hanging fruit or the local government that want to join this track or this kind of scheme. Although there has been some initiation, but none is implemented yet. For example, the one in West Java is quite a big area at 8 hectares, and then will impact almost 2,000 households. So now it's still in the preparation. We're trying to involve the private sectors. So to build a mixed use concept of residential as well as commercial area. So the value of the land, the value of properties also increase. So people can also, especially the local people or the one that now living in that area, can also enjoy the value added having with this kind of development. Of course, we still, this one is still not yet ready to be implemented. We still have some regulation to be developed. Again, some challenges is similar, but in a bigger scale, like negotiation with the community. Now it's a bigger community, and funds needed maybe bigger. So that's why we're trying to find a collaboration, expand the collaboration as well as with the private sector and also development partner. So we need to make a kind of affirmative policy as well as regulation to that the location of this urban renewal to be determined by the regulations, so people will follow, especially the local government and the stakeholders. And then with this, we can have an incentive for increasing. We can provide incentive for the private. They can increase the floor area ratios, and they can have more spaces to sell or to be utilized. And then again, the land is also an issue. So we're trying to have an approach of consolidation, but in a bigger scale. So there might be the local people or the low income people that was living there can also have a share, being a shareholder in this kind of development as well. So again, and then local governments need to be actively participate, because it is actually in their area, so it needs a collaboration, even more a strong collaboration with many sectors. And then we're trying to, if the private sector may not be that interested or seeing this too risky sometimes or too long to take, maybe we need to provide some incentive to do this, like revolving fund, special incentive in floor area ratio, and developing the infrastructure, basic infrastructure from the government and so on. So we still need to make sure that this is implementable, feasible to be implemented in this. At least we're trying to do this in this period of medium-term development plan. So that's maybe from Indonesia. Thank you very much. Back to Celine. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ibu Virgi, and apologies for making you the minister, but I think the director has to do more of the messy work compared to the minister. And we hope you become the minister one day and bring all the changes that you aspire to bring for Java.
Stop there such a second. Yeah. Thank you.
We will now move on to Minh Chau. We are really running short of time. Minh Chau, sorry about that. If you can take over and tell us more about Thailand and the work of ACHR.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, let me share the screen. You see it?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. At first, that is thank you for the inviting ACHR to share in your webinar. I am honored to be on behalf of the ACHR. As a step with some organizer, I say I am not a thinker, not the leader, neither the academic research. Yeah, a doer rather. So today I am a kind of the Grab motorbike driver. Now it's a lot in the street in Bangkok. I'm going to deliver some food for thought, something to think or rethink about. I hope my presentation would convey some key message from the ground, from the Asian Poor Community Network. It's like a small package of rice that is the daily basic but important in Asia. And so some of you already know about the ACHR. That's a start in the 1988, and we were born as the rights fighter. But after the more than 30 years, we evolved from the right base to the solution base, from the project base to scale. Second. As the request of the organizer for the presentation, I am a little bit nervous. And so I searched in the many UN reports about the statistic number, the trend, the situation of the slum. And then I found this diagram in the right side that shows that Asian slum in the global picture. And it shows that is 64% of the global slum population living in Asia. More than 500 million Asian people living in slums. Oh, quite a big number, right? But wait a bit. Look at the photo in the left. That's sent by the one architecture professor who's very active in our network. They are working in Bangladesh, and the photo shows the slum in Dhaka, the capital of the Bangladesh. And so I have a second thought. Slums are home for more than 500 million poor people in Asia. Quite proud, isn't it? So it makes you think or rethink of the slum, don't you? So Asia, amazing informal sector, and you all of you already see it or taste it, know it already, and so I don't need to advertise more. And so just say that is a huge force, but all of it illegal, yeah, by law, by the top-down system. And so the same energy and the same creative, the urban poor make their own housing, and they make something from the nothing. And they occupy or squat on any piece of land in the city. They turn impossible to be possible for their family to live. And you can see that it's even sometimes dangerous or unhealthy environment. The city needs their labor, their service in the construction, manufacturing, transport, tourism, but the city provides no suitable housing for their family. And both the market, private sector, and the government fail to provide affordable housing for the poor family. And so slums are the affordable housing for the urban poor and the migrants. Slums also have many collective aspects. The community gives the security, social support, looking after each other, sharing food, daycare. It sounds very familiar in many research on how to respond to the COVID-19 recently, right? And so here, this comparison table of the two housing delivery paradigms show why the low-income housing program managed by the government often hardly meet the people needs in terms of the affordability, flexibility, and economic opportunity. In Thailand, we have the three key housing providers. That's CODI established in the year 2000, targeting mainly the lowest group, that's the low income and the very poor. And so Ban Man Kong in Thailand started in the 2003. They promote the people-driven housing, and they make the poor community become the doer, the owner, the designer of the project, and they promote the alternative housing rather than single or standard solution. And they promote the citywide. That's the cover all the community in the city, not just the scattered project. And CODI become a national community development fund, a new kind of the support mechanism designed specifically to reach the urban poor community saving group directly, but no individual loan. And CODI as the government window to support the community-led upgrading housing development at the national and the city scale. And so you can see here in the diagram, and so Kobe also get the housing subsidized grant from the ministry, and also they support the community and the community network housing cooperative. They also provide a revolving fund to the housing cooperative and the community network. And the CODI provide the wholesale loan to the community cooperative at the interest at the 4% per year. And community cooperative on lend to the members at the 5 or 6% interest. And they use the margin for the community development and community welfare. And some feature about the progress in the Ban Man Khong program in 15 years. And so you can see that is they already work in the 422 cities, and they already reached over half of the country's slum dwellers. And the land tenure, the 35 of the household get the cooperative ownership, and so 44% they have a long-term lease on the government land, and it means that they can stay in the government land for the 20 or 50 years. And so going beyond the building house, yeah, the CODI and Ban Man Khong also building the community and city resilience as well. And community development fund allow them to develop and solve the many possible poverty activities collectively. And so here you can see that is a Thailand National Community Network. And during the COVID-19, the citywide community network have actively mobilized to help the poor family and to help their community members, like the community kitchen, community garden, community health volunteers, etc. And CODI and Ban Man Khong in the 422 cities in Thailand become the Asia learning hub for community-driven citywide slum upgrading. And so during the 2009 to 2014, ACHR coordinated the ACCA program. ACCA is the Asian Coalition for Community Action. And so with the total budget is 14 million from the Melinda and Bill Gates Foundation. And so during the 5 years, ACCA already support the group in the 215 cities and 19 countries. And ACCA program is a demonstrator how the community-driven citywide slum upgrading work at the scale, the national scale and the city scale. Oh yes, in our region we did it. What now you call that is the global resource of the leaving no one and no place behind. Is that it? So we did it in each city with a very humble support, $60,000 per city. And so you can see that we support the small project, but one person housing project maximum the $40,000, and also that is a $3,000 for the citywide network and citywide mapping, etc. And so we did it with a very humble support. We did it with the citywide strategy from the day one. Citywide thinking, citywide planning, citywide action, and citywide learning. And city work as the team and involve all the possible city stakeholders to find the barriers, the housing solution for all community in the city. And so yeah, the fund is flexible enough, yeah, that poor community can manage, can make the decision together and to meet their real needs. And so at the same time, they need to think hard to negotiate, to make the partnership with the other city actors. And so not only the physical upgrade, we upgrade everything, social, political structure too. So in 5 years, every single day, the one people driven upgrading project is completed in Asia. And so the people not build the road, but the pathway to the freedom. They make the visibility for their room and for their capacity. And so this visibility manifests the new political agenda, the small upgrading to build a longer term relationship, equal partnership. And so this relationship provide the community to touch the hot issues, that's the land. And so here, I will show you about the who get land in our housing project in ACCA program. And so at the beginning, you can see that is yeah, we often hear that is the city will say that is oh, we have no land for the poor. The land is too expensive for the people. But now you can see that is 49% of land in our housing project is a gift given by the government. And so it means that if we find the right way to negotiate, it's very often and possible to get land, the free land from the government. And so also that is, you can see that is, you know, our housing project that often the community face the eviction. And so that reason why the community, they adopt the new model, collective housing. It's a collective housing is a very new model for our Asia community. And so this is you can see that 32. It's different from the European country or the European city. That's a collective or cooperative. The model for you is a very normal or maybe very popular. But for Asian community, that's the new model. And so now the collective housing now become the new movement in Asia. And so you already know why collective, because the collective keep the market out and keep the poor people in. It's cheaper, and collective housing is the binding force for the other collective activity. And so here, because we have the director of the National Housing Program, I just want to, congratulations for your presentation already very clear. And so congratulations for the new program launched by the government Indonesia for the kampung on-site upgrading, and also the new cooperative land for kampung, what you call in Bahasa, the Gotong Royong or Royong Gotong. Yeah, maybe you can correct me. And also that we heard that is the community network and the city government in Jakarta, they're going to set up the new Kodi in Jakarta. And yeah, these are the Kodi or the kind of the government body will support the more than 400 kampungs in Jakarta and in other cities too. Yeah, and we hope to come to learn from you very soon. In Myanmar, and so from the 2019, the regional government states already combine or integrate a community-led model in their official housing program. And the government offer the free land to the official land title called Community Common Land. And so to finalize my presentation, I just let me share with you the action declaration at the Asian Pacific Urban Forum 7. That's just the last year, and so maybe that's the last gather for us. And so the action declaration is made by the Mr. Ruby, the founder of the Homeless Federation in the Philippines, on behalf of the ACHR, Huayru Commission, SDI and Weibo Network. That we are productive citizens. Grassroots community know our city best. And so we are ready to build a partnership. Come to our community, come to our marketplace, to slum area, but take the public transport, have lunch with us, meet our children, influence as an equal partner, not as an afterthought. And we will show you how to work with us. We are ready? Are you? Thank you.
Thank you, Minh Chau. I have to get back to the organizers to check out how much time you have, because you have another session and you have your speakers waiting in line. So how should we proceed, Anthony?
Maybe depends if you have certain strong points you want to voice. Keep it short if possible. Else, we could already do the transition to the round table. If there are specific questions about the presentation, I would suggest to put it into the chat or Q&A section. We can see if we can connect in the debate on the round table to them, or we will answer them per email in the follow-up email that we will do.
Okay, so instead of me talking and wasting time, there's a question that maybe all the panelists can answer. And the question is, how do you bridge the gap between the formal and informal efforts in a city, between the formal community, what the formal city needs, and between the demands of the informal city? How do you do this as an NGO? How do you do it as a government official? If you are the director of housing, and how do you do it if you're a huge organization like Habitat for Humanity? Ajay, you can come.
Thanks, Celine. It cannot be a one-off effort to integrate, various segments of the city. That's formal and informal. It's not formal vis-a-vis informal. These are the integral part of the city, and it's a long drawn process. It's the culture that the city needs to adopt. It's a culture of stakeholder participation in city planning, prioritization of investments, and implementation of programs. Unless and until the poor, the informal settler families are provided space on the discussion table, this integration is not going to happen. The reverse migration has very well demonstrated the dependence of the so-called formal in the city on informal workers, which are largely informal settler families. Uh, the city does depend on the informal sector. The informal sector does contribute to the city economy, and this is how the segment of the population needs to be looked at. There has to be a partnership, a very strong partnership between the informal sector and the other urban stakeholders. Thanks very much.
James, you gave us a very good example of a very proactive government in Bangladesh, and the poor communities benefiting out of that kind of government. Can you tell us more about how they bridge this gap? Hi, James, are you there? We'll need to unmute if you're around.
All right, yes, sorry, I was talking to myself. Well, I think one of the key things in Bangladesh is it is kind of a work in progress. Government is the major player there, so it has to start from us. It's kind of a master planning, you know. And as Mr. Suri just now said, a partnership, collaboration, and engagement of all the stakeholders. And one of our the engagement there has resulted because we are a small player, a small project, you know, but what we want to do is basically to kind of create, and as I earlier said, then kind of a macro impact. And we come up with a kind of a NGO forum, and we do every year what we call it a housing forum, and bring in all the key players. We don't not only do it in Bangladesh, but we also do a Asia Pacific Housing Forum in various countries. So number one, organizational mandate and strategic focus is most important. And with our experience, I can say that embracing the collaboration, partnership, and cooperation on project approaches, you know, bringing in all key players together. Number three, community engagement and participation is also very, very important in terms of, and what we saw that in order to deliver a good project and good results, engaging all the slum communities into this, I think, and sustain all our key activities is relationship with the stakeholders, especially with the government agencies. And one of the things what we did there was had a strong relationship with the city corporation, municipal corporation, and other players who are there, and resulting, I think, an openness to build an institution capacity, like, you know, to run an urban programming, like institutional strengthening and institutional development is also very, very key. Some of the things what we have been doing this, and I think we can see some of the result there as an impact that improved community sanitation led to community recognition and connected informal settlement household to the government and other services providers. That means that is increased in considerable decrease in the health-related diseases. You know, if you really go to the public health center there, they can easily say that, okay, there's some kind of a reduction in the patient coming there, you know, for the treatment. So we are in process of doing the kind of an evaluation to see whether what kind of an impact has been created, and also, like, you know, improved healthcare due to safer drinking water and sanitation facilities which has been provided, and the awareness which was created. So I think that has really kind of also contributed. So I think it's a big subject, but I think it is we are doing a kind of a little small part of the whole bigger impact.
You. Yeah. So Abu Virgi, you have followed the steps of Bangladesh, and you're doing a lot as a government already. And how do you see the next 10 years of how you engage the informal, because that's a huge population in Indonesia, like you said, maybe more than 50–60% of people living in informal situations. See this moving forward.
Yeah, as I mentioned in my presentation before, that we want to have a more comprehensive approach and together collaboration with even with the informal sectors. I mean, informal dwellers in informal settlements like in slum area. So we have to see them as our partners to work together to improve the condition. So that's why, as I mentioned, the prerequisite that we have to negotiate, I mean, to discuss with the local community, with the communities, to make sure that their rights, but their rights are fulfilled, but they also know what they need to do. I mean, their obligation or their contribution to the how they can also contribute to the situation and to improve the situation. So it's a collaboration, and it's not just community, but also the local government, provincial government, central government, stakeholders, like NGOs, also like the one that has been mentioned by Minh Chau in Jakarta. Several cases that like in Kampung Aquarium, it's a collaboration between the NGO the role of them is being a facilitators between the government and the local communities to make sure that they they will have a common understanding, common agreement on how they're gonna improve the area. But the people still have their rights, still respected their rights, their preferences, their I mean, like in the one in Jakarta that mentioned by Minh Chau in Kampung Aquarium, they were in maybe almost 1,000 or 2,000 households. They will build apartment, what do you call it? High rise housing, not that high, maybe 5 floors, only 5 floors, because they want to reduce the energy consumption in the long term. So something like that. The aspiration from the informal, because they are the one who will maintain the buildings, maintain and manage the buildings by themselves. So that's how the approach that they want to do in the next coming years. I mean, so it's a collaboration between all, and the aspiration from the community will be absorbed and trying as much as possible to be implemented in the project.
Thank you. Minh Chau, you want to add to this? On how you see the role of the NGO in bridging the gap between the formal and the informal?
Yeah, maybe I just want to add that is, you know, this is very important for sure. That is because of our community already work a lot, and they have experience how to improve their living condition, their housing, and so, but just the formal sector, the government need to kind of, you know, maybe I think need to change a little bit the support method, because so far, yeah, it seems that it's the housing sector now is rely on the kind of, you know, the individual or the project based, the contractor based, and so that's I think that is that could destroy the community value, and also that is a give to the individual the right, but for the poor people it's very difficult to access to the housing program by, support by the government like this. And so, and then I mean that is a change the support method. It means that is maybe the government should think about the kind of, you know, the new title, the land cooperative or the collective land to the community, and so it keeps the people together and it remains and build up the community together. The poor need the community, the poor need to live together, and also the same as a loan. And so if we give the loan to the individual, and so it's a very difficult to manage the community as the kind of collective movement to take care to each other. And so it means that is building the house. We don't need to think, yeah, we shouldn't think about the house as only the physical or the building only, but that's the house is the where the people live together, and where the poor people take care of each other and find the you know the job and creating the income together. Yeah, that's my idea.
Because of the time constraint, I will now hand over to Anaclaudia to do the roundtable number 2. And thank you all for participating. Those of you who still have the stamina can continue for the next hour. Bye.
Great panel. Thank you, Celine. Thank you, all the presenters. We had very interesting cases, a national government sharing about the national platform, the way they are working with cities, and collaboration with other sectors of the society as well. We had the case of Dhaka, Bangladesh from the perspective of an NGO. We also have the excellent overviews from Ajay and from ACCA, from Asia. with a specific progress in many countries, and also the case of Thailand being highlighted. So I think we have food for thoughts and reflections now. And the idea now is to have an open roundtable. Anthony and I will moderate. So you can either reach to one of us privately or openly, or, scream, raise your hand visibly. Please turn on your videos. Everybody's invited to make comments and speak. The major objective of this roundtable is to collect people to build this community of practice on slum upgrading at the global level. Somebody mentioned the regional housing forums led by Habitat for Humanity. We're also expecting to organize a global session in May at the Latin American Housing Forum. So we are trying to create more and more spaces for us to exchange on a technical level, but also on a reflexive level among practitioners, researchers, the whole community interested in slum upgrading. So Ajay also pointed out to many challenges that coincide with the challenges that are mentioned by the panelists and presenters, and many of them has to do with technology. So technology was not specified in any presentation, but there was a very nice comment from Omar on actually a question, and maybe Omar, you can share your comment or your reflections about technology and how technology could support, many of these challenges: community database, expanding service level, benchmarking, mechanisms for institutionalized governance and collaboration. Omar, are you still with us?
Yes, I am. Good evening from Bangkok, everyone. It's really a privilege to be with all of you, and the presentations were just truly inspiring, so thank you for that. My name is Omar Sadiq, and I work at the United Nations Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific here in Bangkok. And just a little bit of background on my query. As an intergovernmental platform in the region, we are supporting national governments to design their national fiscal stimulus plans to COVID-19. I think this is really important because we're not going to see this level of funding pumped into the system in a long time, maybe in our lifetime. And so what we're trying to do is ensure that we take a whole of government approach, whole of society approach with these fiscal stimulus plans, and that there's specific provisions for state and local built into those. On top of that, we're also working with local authorities in the region, Southeast Asia, South Asia, and the Pacific, with their COVID-19 recovery plans to ensure that that vertical integration does not stop and goes into the community level as well. One of the big demands that we're seeing from local government executives is prioritizing the transition to digital infrastructure services as part of COVID-19. We know that this is quite a hot topic even before COVID, with the rise of the so-called smart cities in the region. But at the same time, we have this huge digital divide, and cities are at such different starting points when it comes to their technological environments. So my question really to the panelists is, how do you see the role of technologies in supporting some of these efforts, going forward? Thank you very much, and over.
Thank you, Omar. We have here a queue of experts, practitioners willing to intervene. Maybe we can find not only among the panelists, but also among the other participants now in the roundtable responses to your questions. I believe Aparna, you would like to come in. Aparna from GIZ India.
Yeah, yeah, hi. So yeah, it's a I think a great opportunity to be with so many of you who has so much of experience on this particular subject. I was wondering that, I'm not taking that Omar's point right now about the digital divide. So I think that I would put it aside right now, and I think we need to talk about it a bit later. My idea was, I'm building on what Ajay said about formal and informal. So just for kind of, making it a bit more explicit, what I'm trying to say is that, when we look at the literature, we can divide it into the planning literature, which talks about spatial planning. And that's where I find the Latin American literature quite rich, which is talking about zoning, about how you use your spatial planning instruments to create an inclusive city. So that is one stream of it. And then the second part of it is also the governance part of it. Where that's where maybe all this community participation, how do you engage with citizens, who have different kinds of citizenship, or who may not have, say, very strong voting rights maybe, or there is a different lobbying there. So the governance literature and their participation in the local processes, and then this spatial planning literature. So I am trying to make this two classification. I'm just saying that, is it something that we need to do a bit more on those two streams? Because it seems that we do have a lot of granular information, but when we aggregate it, somewhere this gets lost. And somewhere, at least from the Indian experience, I can say that the spatial planning regime is not at all talking about the other part of the participation and all the stuff. And when it comes to the spatial, the participation literature, it is not talking about the spatial planning at a macro scale. I think that's where somewhere I find that maybe a bit more work needs to be done to connect these two streams of thought. Taking the second point that I would like to make is that I think the first problem that we are creating by imagining it as a binary of formal and informal, because nothing, at least from India experience, I can say that nothing is completely formal and nothing is completely informal. So there is a continuum, and maybe that the semantics has to change so that we don't fall into this trap of formal and informal. Maybe that's where the catch is, because the global south has to really devise a different way of urbanization, because we are not urbanizing the way the urbanization happened before. So if we go on naming something like where your 60% of people are there and saying that that is informal, I think that is where, and trying to formalize it, I think that is where we are kind of getting into a spin. So maybe that nomenclature and the capacity to use the different kind of nomenclature, maybe that could be another thing that we need to build on. So those are the 2 points that I was toying with it. And then from here, if we can look into more into the governance literature and then figure it out that, where things have worked, like in the Cody example, if it has worked, then what has worked there? And if the governance structure is more contributing, maybe that is where we need to focus. So with this, I would stop, but I'm kind of feeling that, the COVID experience, at least in India, has really thrown this fact that the numbers are not really correct. So the researchers, what the numbers they have projected is not really true. And I think we need to revisit that. And maybe a practice-oriented theorization, I'm not sure what name we can give it, which may not be robust in terms of methodology, and it may not fulfill all the academic standards, but a practice-oriented to create where you make mistakes, you kind of still mess it around, but you theorize from there. I think that is a discipline that also needs to be strengthened. So what could be that? And I am finding that this practitioners community, the way you are creating, maybe that's an answer to it. So how does one get investment here and make it a bit more robust in terms of doing further work on this? So this is something that I am really looking forward to. How do we strengthen this way of doing research rather than doing this academic way where the numbers are not really coming? This is being now established with an experience like pandemic, that what we are having right now. With this, I stop here. Thank you.
Hi, Aparna. This is great. This is actually the main question of this round table, right? So how can we actually strengthen this community of practice? So we hope to find this common answer throughout the sessions that we are organizing, and hopefully have a more structured way to move forward for the next year. So yeah, Renu, you are a practitioner from India. India was mentioned. Ajay mentioned some cases from India too, but India doesn't have a national policy. So what's your perspective from the practitioner side? We are also working a lot with technology, right? Through other laboratories and meetings.
Yeah, thank you, Anna. I'm Renu Khosla. I'm director of the Center for Urban and Regional Excellence. This is a development organization, CURE, and we've been working in several cities over the past 20 years, working with low-income slum communities and organizing them to improve and transform their quality of their lives. So one of the things that we actually do is to try and create integrational infrastructure, actually put it on the ground as models which can be seen by the local governments, and then nudge them to replicate these in other areas. I have a few quick observations on, if I was to put the three key issues that challenge in situ slum upgrading in the Indian context, I can put them under locality, which is land and land tenure, localization or localization of the solutions, so it is locality, localization, which means solutions must be created where the people are. Land has to be tenured, and then solutions need to be customized, and so that they can be integrated, so they can be de-engineered and retrofitted and then integrated into the city broadly. If we can, and then of course we can add livelihoods, etc., to it. But the idea is that if we can tackle these three things, we would be in a position to have a city which is more sensitive to its poor and is able to integrate them within the city. But over the years, I'm also now coming to I'm a little confused, or I'm coming to a position where I'm saying, I think we don't need to worry a lot about land tenure, because that's not happening. It hasn't happened for so many years, and we keep, requesting governments to start giving land tenure, so I think we need to get away from it, and we need to recognize that we can have integrational infrastructure where we can network by simplifying the infrastructure that we are providing, simplified sewers inside slum areas, which get connected to the trunk infrastructure for all those years that the city is not going to remove the slums. We give them a quality of life, which would then make them far more productive and therefore contribute to the city's GDP. My third point is that I think local governments need to start recognizing the contribution and the value that the city gets from low-income communities, not just by the fact that they are contributing to the running of our cities, but they can also help us generate resource. For example, we have done a lot of work where low-income slum communities are actually harvesting a lot of rainwater and recharging excess into the ground, and therefore they are repairing and the underground aquifers and saving city a huge amount of money. Now, that's the value that the city has to put a figure to, a number to, and then I think they would better respect the contribution of these people, and therefore look at them as citizens, people who actually need to be serviced and serviced equally and leveled up. I think my two last problems are that communities of practice like ours, NGO communities, we set up a lot of models, but we don't see pathways to replication. And therefore we are, accused of creating a graveyard of pilots, which cannot be scaled up. But that's not the fact. The fact is that the city has legacies and systems that they are unable to overcome, and therefore it is impossible for them to localize solutions. We need to informalize the formal, and that's what I always say, that let's not talk about formalizing the informal, let's talk about informalizing the formal. And I think that is, I believe, the way to go forward is to get rid of these legacies and to allow people's voices to go through into plans, into city plans, and then actually be implemented on the ground. Thank you.
Sorry. Thank you, Renu. I see Mark Misselhorn is agreeing with you. Mark, you want to talk? Mark? Okay. Claudio? Okay. Mark is checking his microphone access. Okay. So, Claudio, you want to make a comment before Mark comes in? And you also can speak. Yeah, we can hear you well. I just want to say that for the Spanish speakers, if they want to intervene in Spanish, it's fine because we have interpretation. Yeah, but not for you. Go ahead. You look good.
Okay. Thank you very much. Very well organized, good conversation. Some comments from my side, working in different parts of the world on the issues. And one of the things that strikes me is that we are just finishing today a Latin American program with the Lincoln Institute, where we have 30 plus practitioners from several countries, and we're looking at some questions are coming up very strong, which I think are very useful for our colleagues in Asia. One of the things that struck is how can we explain that land prices in Dhaka is similar to land prices in cities in the US? How can we explain that land prices in most Latin American cities are exorbitant and obscene when compared to land prices in American cities? And when we compare the GDP, there's something wrong there. And we seem to take for granted that land ownership is in the hands of landowners. And in order for you to make land accessible for low-income population, you either organize them and make them make some mechanism to save money to purchase land to find a place in the city, or you accept that the government has to deal with landowners and buy land to put at the service of the city. And I think we need to connect the whole planning system, the fiscal capacity of cities, and the instrument to intervene in different modes of land ownership in order to make land available that is within the city and not in the periphery. When I was talking to federations in Davao or in Manila some years back, many NGOs were working with community groups in order to mobilize savings group to purchase land, but cheap land, which was very far from the city, penalizing double the population, penalizing because put them again in living conditions that are far from acceptable in our, let's say, basic human rights framework, and put them on a peripheral land and putting on distance from income, from service, from facilities, and putting an incredible cost of transport on their household budget. And this seems to repeat over and over, and we seem to be in a vicious cycle. And we organize the community, and I think the Asian experience is strong on that, on organization, on putting together people, so mobilizing communities, getting them focused on particular goals. But the graph that we saw that 43% of the cases that communities are purchasing land or government is providing land on a less percentage. So I think the access to land issue needs to be put up on the top of the political agenda, and different modes of access to land have to be found, as in Latin American cities. Many cities are using different instruments to make land available where people can access basic services and not be totally in the peripheral land. The other comments that I would like to say is that we seem to focus very much on the, let's say, slum upgrading, either on a citywide, which I think is a right policy. We go to programs, let's stop with doing little projects here and there, fight for programs, citywide, programmatic approach, scale up. Yes, national, some cases it does work on national, but I have been arguing in favor of citywide, but it has to come together with alternatives as well. Yeah, alternatives to informality, because if you keep just doing only upgrading, you signaling the market, both formal and informal market, that in one day that land will be regularized in one way or another. So we need to have the two pillars, both the supply of affordable housing in different modalities, size, standards, location, price, at the same time that you promote upgrading, which in other terms is you are promoting the construction or the production of housing solutions without building houses, because you're regularizing the land, you're putting infrastructure, you supporting communities, so where they're already established. But I would make a strong point, I'll conclude with that. So first, going to that two pillars, which we call the twin track approach. When I was working in Habitat, we were pushing very strong. Let's not only putting housing there, or let's not put only upgrading. We have to do one single policy with these two pillars, so that you can bring prices down and the pressure of the existing stock, so that housing becomes more affordable to everybody in the city. Because otherwise, we will continue with this vicious circle and the poor being pushed to more and more peripheral land. That's one point. The other one is about the informality of the formality and all that. I think that we need to come to terms. The big settlements that are there consolidated, we need to have strong interventions, which has a spatial characteristic, which is reblocking, plan, respecting people's rights, having the possibilities to relocate people within areas and create accessibility and the connectivity of these areas to the rest of the city. We cannot continue to accept that this is the normal way to go. It's not okay. It's not okay at all. And the numbers are showing it's increasing and increasing. The number of people living under the international definition of slums, lacking one of the 5 components that has been classified. And the numbers are increasing and will continue to increase, because the pressure is there in terms of demographic, in terms of fight for infrastructure, for service and all that. So I think we need to promote a formalization, not in the way Peru did, because, formalizing the informal, as Peru did in 4.5 million plots that had been occupied, or location that had been occupied by the poor, create a situation that is unbearable. You are consolidating a situation that in no acceptable terms would be okay for you to regularize that. But the approach was following De Soto's idea that this is an enormous dead economy or dead property that is in the hands of the poor. Let's formalize that, bring to the economy so that they can access credit and all that. What happened? Only a tiny 2% of this population have access to credit. So the theory that De Soto was promoting did not even work in his own country, Peru. So all that, and my last point is we need to go to scale. The nice experience that we saw in the let's say the community finance program in the Philippines, the 300 cases with CODI in Thailand, experience of Spark in India. No, we have now 50 years of slum upgrading experience there available. The Cities Alliance has a repository, UN Habitat has a report. You know, we know what works and what doesn't, but the nice experiences that we've seen in some of the Asian cities have not gone to the scale that we need. We need to go to the scale where policies are transformed. We're not transforming policies, and institutions are not changing. The institutions remain the same. And there we push, we organize, we put SDI, we put the Asian Coalition, we put all these NGOs working with the community groups, but still we're repeating the same story, and we're not changing radically institutions and the policies. So I think we need to have a very strong debate, and not even to accept that certain things we see in the settlements are okay. They're not okay at all. We're penalizing people already twice by putting in positions where they should not be, but there is no other alternative. So what are the alternatives? Yeah, it's end up in places that many people would not like to live. And there we see people living their day and earning their income and subject to, and the COVID put that naked in front of us. Where was the biggest hit? In these areas. And where was the state? Nowhere to be seen. And who was organizing? The population, bottom up, finding in favelas in Brazil, the community organizations were contracting doctors, ambulances, creating their own system, organizing by street, creating their own monitors to see that if people had any impact of the virus, they were putting the empty schools in the settlements because they were closed. So these are the things that I think we need a radical discussion to change the status quo in the way we do slum upgrading and the way we're looking at this informal urbanization that is gaining, cities are getting out of control, and the ones who are benefiting are the ones who live very nicely in their big plots with their salaries and the access to the wealth that the city provides. I mean, these are some of the comments, and it's the discussion that we're ending today in the group in Latin America, and I would really be delighted to continue this conversation. I think the Cities Alliance could facilitate, a more organized conversation on the different issues around that. And we need to change the game. The game is still the same way we've been doing this game. I think it's the high time to change that. And the post-COVID is an opportunity. We have to take that opportunity.
Thank you very much, Claudio. Yeah, as always, great intervention, to the point, very, very engaging. From my side, just one thing, because you were mentioning cities are getting out of control. I'm an academic, and my research is actually not like, my core research is actually not on slum upgrading, but on real estate developers and like affordable housing policy and how to activate markets. And there you see like a lot of how like trying to activate the benefits for normalization as an incentive for market actors to intervene and to provide also solution. Because if you want to tackle the issue at scale, on the one hand, you have to upscale the bottom-up approaches. On the other hand, you also have to activate all actors there. But if you see what is happening in practice, like in Peru, if you try to integrate the urban poor and slum upgrading to market, if it's badly done, then this unlocking again ends up in the hand of the wealthier part of the population, because they are in the driving seats of most reforms. Just as a point, I think there's much more to be learned, and I think that attention to be given to slum upgrading efforts or bottom of the pyramid solutions by market actors. So Anna and I will use this momentum with all the supporting institutions that we have to organize some webinars, as you mentioned it, a little bit more targeted in the coming year, leading towards the Latin American Housing Forum. And I personally would be interested to have like one of these focused on like where markets or private companies have a stronger role, because from a global perspective, you see interesting solutions where profit margins are not like the sole driver in companies, and this could be interesting to understand more from an academic point of view. Like markets and real estate developers have been long time neglected due to various reasons, and exactly these kind of forums I think are the perfect platforms for exchanging these ideas and driving a research agenda further. We have a lot of people who want to talk. First of all, Mark, who solved his microphone. I will give you the word, and thank you very much.
Thanks, Polly. Sorry I wasn't able to be in the entire webinar, partly to time, other meetings and connectivity. But I really thought that some of the comments that Renu made were quite useful. The experience in South Africa, and I imagine this is shared with some of the other countries, is that there are serious resource constraints that largely circumscribe and determine what's possible. Fiscal resources, capacity in the state, institutional arrangements. And so any endeavor or set of objectives that's very ambitious, and certainly the objective of formalization and of tenure regularization or formal tenure solutions are very ambitious. And the trend has been that they therefore become exclusionary because they can't be scaled up. They're done at a substantial opportunity cost. So we end up with a few settlements being addressed in this way. And then the rest of the settlements don't have fire protection, sanitation, and solid waste removal. So certainly from our point of view here in South Africa and in the eThekwini urban metro, we've got to make hard decisions about large numbers of people and allocate the limited resources to achieve the best outcomes, being as ambitious as we can be, but also needing to service and improve quality of life in large numbers of settlements. In our case, 580 settlements, over well over 250,000 households. So it's a huge challenge. Every city is different, but I just think whatever approach is adopted needs to be one that is inclusionary, which means that it needs to set the bar at a height that can actually be jumped. And if we can't really believe that we can jump that height at scale, we've got to really be asking whether we should be trying to set the bar at that level. And it's difficult because it does mean there are going to be serious compromises. We have to accept that we're not going to have adequate housing in the top structure sense of the word. We can't see that being something that's quickly achievable. But what we think can be achieved in a short to medium term would be at least that the health and safety and sense of inclusion within urban management would be things that we should be at least saying we're going to achieve at scale. So I'll just leave it there, in the hope that as the agenda and discussion and discourse on this goes forward, we're able to balance the sort of quality dimensions of upgrading with scalability and what is replicable. Thanks.
Thank you very much for sharing your point of view. It is exactly the different experiences in the region of Latin America, Africa, and in Asia, I think, where it's great to see similarity and differences, and then try to delve a little bit further why things work here and not there, and what are the particular challenges. We have, let me see, John McDonald, who I would like to give the word now. Joanne, are you with us?
Okay. Do you hear me?
Fantastic.
Okay. So thank you very much for making this possible to share the Asian experience and to meet so many friends I haven't seen for a long time, like Celine, Minh Chau, etc. It's wonderful that we try to learn from each other, and I would like to focus on one aspect that I think is very important for us Latin Americans to bring from Asia, and that is this emphasis that you feel in Asia on the process in all these community-based programs. In Latin America, somehow we are more focused on the output or the product of these kind of programs. But here in Asia, we find that a great deal of the efforts are put into generating very powerful community organization and to enable communities to really take charge and lead their own process. And this is really important because it's the component that will make possible for these kind of programs to grow and to extend and to scale up and to become more powerful in our cities. If you have a strong community, you can be sure that that good ideas come up and that somehow you will have a proactive way of dealing with these problems that affect so many slums and so many urban poor. It also means that we, and I would like to really state this, that our role as professionals is also very different in Asia as it is in Latin America. We should really try to stand behind communities and not try to represent them and make all decisions instead of them. It's very important for us to really understand that we are there to support, to enable, to facilitate, but not to replace the role of communities. Also, the important tool of saving, which is so very difficult in our Latin America now, savings that somehow balance the power between actors and stakeholders and make communities able to stand up for their rights in the city. I think that there are so many things that you can learn from the Asian experience, and also maybe bring to Asia from Latin America some ideas that maybe you should take into account. It's never too early to start to look at public policies, public housing, social housing policies. Minh Chau said that only a few urban poor are receiving their houses from public policies. Here in Latin America, the policies have a long and strong history, and they are very, very powerful, and somehow they make it difficult for these other kinds of programs, like these people-driven programs, to stay in force. We should look at that. We should look at these conventional social housing policies and try to make them not to displace this other kind of programs like these slums or begging programs, but to complement them in a very favorable way. So somehow local governments are not displaced by very powerful central agencies, but that somehow mass production does not erase the diversity which we need, because each city, each locality, each country is different, and mass production really doesn't incorporate all the specific needs of the poor. We should also look at urbanization, which is when it comes in so strongly into the countries, it makes it difficult also to find land, to find an environment where people can really act and work and have some liberty and freedom to put their own agenda on the table. The subsidy environment also, I would suggest that you look carefully that at this subsidy environment, which comes with these public policies and somehow would limit, because it makes it very difficult for people to work as groups, as communities, and enhances the power of money to get into the city. You buy your right into the city when in these very harsh subsidy environments that we have in Latin America. So somehow I think we can learn from each other. We can, and these kinds of seminars are very useful, so we can bring into our countries and cities and regions some knowledge that is developed in other regions. We don't have to wait. We can learn from each other and make it more effective. So just a few comments I wanted to put into the conversation and maybe make you reflect on many other issues that we could share in this kind of exchange. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Joanne, for sharing your view with your wealth of experience. I think, particularly, Chile is a great country to look also for inspiring solution, and it is also interesting to see with the new constitutional process how the future will be. Also in terms of looking at the protests, etc. Also in terms of equity and what happens to slum upgrading. We have some more to present. We are running late. Anaclaudia already mentioned it, but we try to keep it in a civilized manner. The delay. Let's try to do it within 50 minutes. Anaclaudia is sharing a great initiative. The Decalogue, everyone who's been involved has been also at the email list. Anaclaudia, do you want to quickly talk about it before we give the word to Andrew?
Sure, I don't want to cut Andrew. Just wanted to share here quickly this group of organizations that includes a platform, the Urban Housing Practitioners Hub, Habitat for Humanity, TECHO, UCL, the Right to the City platform, UCLG, UN Habitat, has worked together in the last, I say, 2 years. And this is a very summarized result of this work. What are the components of slum upgrading? What we think are the critical components of slum upgrading? And this was the Decalogue campaign that we just made in upfront to the Minurvi Assembly that took place last week, gathering all the housing and urban ministries in Latin America. So you can see on our social media, it's all there. But I think it's a nice overview of how can we provide a, comprehensive slum upgrading instead of only looking at housing or services isolated, as many mentioned in the chat. But I will leave it for a while. Anthony, go ahead. Or Andrew, okay. Andrew.
Yeah, let's give it to Andrew now.
Thank you so much. And that is really an interesting initiative, so thank you. So yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. I work for REAL. So for those of you not familiar with REAL, REAL's an affordable housing innovator and investor based in the UK that focuses on affordable housing solutions for people in the bottom 40% of the income pyramid in Africa and Asia. And we're funded by the UK and Swedish governments. I've been doing this for over 30 years, actually. So there's a lot we can say on this topic. I guess I'd just like to briefly touch on two things. First of all, just to echo Claudio's call in particular for sort of plurality of models and solutions that can enable pathways to scale. REAL has a long history of operating in slums and informal settlements, in particular working with our partner SS&S and Spark in India to leverage government subsidies to deliver quality housing at little or no cost to poor urban households. And we've actually just published a longitudinal impact study on that I'll perhaps share in the chat box shortly. But this kind of model is actually increasingly not our main focus, and rather now we increasingly focus more on demonstrating the commercial viability of affordable housing in greenfield or brownfield urban sites at a price that is affordable to the bottom 40%, in doing so to leverage and mobilize the private sector to deliver at scale. And I guess we feel quite strongly at REAL that the huge housing deficits across Asia in particular, but also Africa, along with rapid exploding urbanization stats and changing demographics, does necessitate solutions that provide viable alternatives to the continued growth of slums alongside the crucial upgrading and in situ slum work. So we feel that there is a spectrum of solutions here and very much echo Claudio's remarks there. That's, I guess, my main contribution, I think. But secondly, but just to touch on sort of, I guess, the question of informality and technological solutions that come up in the roundtable and in the earlier presentations. We very much feel, and I very much feel, that housing finance for the informal sector is a huge area of work that is absolutely vital to unlocking solutions, and it's intrinsic to Real's priority country strategies over the coming years. And I think we're approaching this partly as a challenge of engaging with banks and lenders and financial institutions to convince them of the opportunity. It's also a challenge of bringing innovations to market that overturn orthodox thinking about the typical customer. And India, Real in particular, have a really fascinating partner in India called Scintellect, that's a software developer that has developed a platform to enable lenders to underwrite and accurately lend to informal micro entrepreneurs. And Scintellect is a startup, it's an emerging business, but it's getting a lot of traction in India. It's being adapted in Indonesia with the government and the World Bank, and we're also working with them closely to promote their take-up in Pakistan and African markets. And we feel there's the opportunity here is vast to actually enable quality accurate lending to informal sector clients that can transform societies at scale. Just one final point on that. Interestingly, I was talking about Scintellect at a World Bank convened webinar just last month, and I was actually challenged on this by a number of experts that in doing so, in promoting this kind of intervention, are we actually accepting the realities of the informal sector, which I guess was being presented as perhaps something that's inherently not good, rather than seeking to change it or even eradicate it. And I thought this is a really interesting idea, and I think there's a really interesting discussion there. But I guess ultimately my position would be that we have to work with the realities of the societies where we are. And you look at somewhere like India, economic growth has not been accompanied with a reduction of informality. It is clearly here to stay, and therefore we do need the innovations and the solutions that can ultimately enable quality housing assets and services at scale that could be pushed down market. So yeah, that's very much kind of mine and Real's position. Really enjoying the webinar, and it's a pleasure to be part of the discussion. So thank you for including us.
Thank you very much, Andre. It's always great to have Realm on board. If we're now moving to wrapping up, kind of impossible always to wrap up such a session. From my point, an academic, I will probably say some words, and then Anaclaudia, you can do the final wrap up. First of all, from my side, thank you very much. I really like this exchange because we have people from different sectors, from the government, from civil society, professionals, academics, etc. And I think exactly these kind of exchanges are needed more than ever. If we see that what COVID has already done and will be doing also in the post-pandemic recovery, we need this kind of partnership to solve the great challenges of our time. But we also see that moments of crisis are always the moments where inequality are increasing. You see this kind of parallel. So the challenges will be even greater in the next years to come. I mentioned, I think this is one side, that we try to organize some more webinars in the early months of next year, more focused, because what becomes clear, and everyone who is involved in the discourse already knows that very well, the challenges are very similar, despite all the differences in the initiative, etc. And I think we need to acknowledge, and we see that the major challenges seem to repeat themselves in Latin America, Africa, and Asia. This is on the one hand like the crucial element of land, how to solve this, and their specific solutions are very specific to, I would say, the context, and this is great to learn. For example, me having done a PhD in India and then doing research on Latin America, I was mesmerized by the concept of the social function of land. It was something that never crossed my mind, having not studied extensively Latin America, but just having an alternative value system that not the economic maximization is required, but you can also try to maximize a social value of land is absolutely fantastic. And I think it also gives a framework to do differently. There's still many of challenging to operationalize it, but I think these are exactly the kind of pearls we are looking for. Land is an issue, access to finance, as mentioned by many, and also systematic approaches, like where you really manage also that not only have curative and preventive measures in slum upgrading, but also think beyond this focus of non-housing market and see how you you can activate the housing market also to reach lower that the provided solutions of the market reaches income groups that it didn't before. There are now quite some studies, Real has done something, McKinsey, other, that shows that if you really try to activate the levers that impede supply and make it costly, you would in most places be able to provide houses that are half the prices. And imagine how many more people could actually access also formal housing. Not to say, I mean, if you do the same research in why informal housing and slum upgrading are costlier than they should be, there's also a lot of saving potential. So just this to show you, I think these kind of dialogues are absolutely vital, even more in our times, and we're really looking forward to a continuous engagement. We have great institutions on board and are hoping that in the year 2021, we can continue this kind of dialogues. Anaclaudia, I give you the word.
Thank you, Anthony. There's not much to say. I think you did a very good wrap up already. We have learnings from the Latin American session, we have learnings from the African session, and we have now learnings from the Asia session. But I believe overall the consensus are there that we do need to prioritize, you know, the knowledge, the local knowledge, the local protagonism of communities, of local governments, but also having enabling environments at the national level, funding available, policies, laws and regulations that will allow the local stakeholders to operate. So it's not an issue about, you know, what's more important or less important, but national efforts are equally important as community efforts, so that we can reach some level of cooperation. I believe there are many responses, and the cases point out to the need of collaboration and cooperation and setting up partnership, but we're still far away to go. In Latin America, we have established some governance mechanisms that are being threatened in some countries and in some cities, or not having continuity. In the other hand, in Asia, so incredible, as John said, experiences bottom up, that still needs a framework at the city level, national level, the work Habitat for Humanity is doing with stakeholders in Dhaka, Bangladesh, advocacy, knowledge. So there's a lot of work and effort that we need to put in different countries, in different regions, and at the global level to promote slum upgrading, to promote access to technologies and solutions. But I believe most of all, to establish consensus and critical mass of what is important and the way to go. We are all facing huge challenges, all the regions. Latin America, with all the institutions, the perception of the social function of the land is far behind. I mean, there's lots of slums, and we haven't managed to have, you know, continuity in many programs at the national level. There's fragmentation between housing policies and slum upgrading policies. There is fragmentation between local and national policies, decentralization process going on. And I just would like to highlight one basic aspect that we are all facing, which is the structural inequalities in all of our countries in the global south. So as much as we can do to have slum upgrading, holistic, comprehensive slum upgrading policies, housing policies, etc., unless we are not able to fight and overcome the structural inequalities in our cities and countries, there's only limited possibilities for urban and housing slum upgrading policies. So we'll keep, as we say here in Latin America, drying ice. But we should do our maximum from the urban perspective. So yeah, let's try to give, to put an effort and try to have a good concept note summarizing the outcomes of these 3 sessions that can help us to establish a solid session next year in May at the Regional Housing Forum in Latin America, hosted by Habitat for Humanity and the Urban Housing Practitioners Hub, and also to have preparatory sessions that are following Claudio's advice, that are more, you know, focused and try to deep dive in some of the aspects that were highlighted. So these are the efforts that we are willing to do from the Cities Alliance, from from, I believe Anthony already said, Sangalin, and the broad range of organizations and institutions that we have supporting this this interaction. So thank you all. Apologies for being late, but yeah, we need to put some time for reflection, otherwise we'll not be able to move forward. And well, thank you very much, and see you then in the next session. And thank you for all participants in Facebook and your patience and everything.